Hey, everybody, how's it going? This is Rob Taylor, your host at Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. This podcast is brought to you by White Rabbit Intel, where you can hyper target your market and know who's your next best customer before you reach out to them inside and outside your sales pipeline or funnels. Super exciting stuff. But today I have Kristen with me. This is a very unique guest. I've never had someone like this on the podcast before, so it may be refreshing for some of you people out there. So what does Kristen do? Well, she books podcasts for people. So it's kind of interesting having a podcast booker on a podcast. It's kind of like a catch-22 almost, but it's exciting. She is a firm believer in people connection. So business is built through connections, and that is everything. It's true. So relationship building is everything. That is business. People buy from the people they like, trust, and can relate to. So Kristen, if you can just give us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I'm excited to be here. I think that you described me very accurately. So my kind of formal introduction, though, is I run a podcast booking agency. We help people increase their visibility and credibility as a podcast guest. So basically, exactly what I'm doing right now, being a podcast guest on Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. This is what we help our clients do. So it's fun. I live and breathe it, obviously, because this is what I do for my business, and it's what we help our clients do as well.
Well, how about this? Why do you do it?
Oh, you know what? It's very interesting how I ended up in this space. So I was running a virtual assistant agency that started in 2015, and fast forward to 2018, I decided that I wanted to start talking to entrepreneurs about what I had learned about entrepreneurship. I had found that a lot of people were just overcomplicating this whole like business building game, like doing all the things, when you are an entrepreneur and you're on any social media platform, you're going to hear that you need to have, a blog and 100,000 people on Instagram following you, and you need to do email marketing, and you need to run a challenge, and you need to do webinars, and like, have you explored Pinterest? Like 500 trillion things, right? And what I realized is that I had very strategically ditched all that stuff to grow my business, strictly focused on like acquiring customers, connecting with them, serving our clients. And what I also saw running a virtual assistant agency was that a lot of our clients, I'll say it this way, our clients fell into one or two categories. They were either really successful and they continued to work with us and their business was taking off, or they were like rapidly declining and they couldn't afford us and they were just going away. They didn't have a business anymore. And what I found was that the stark difference between the two was people that were overcomplicating it and, doing all the things, and then people that were really hyper focused. They picked marketing that really aligned with their strengths. They put their blinders on and just went after the things that they went after. And so in 2018, I said to my team, I want to start talking about what I'm seeing here. I think I have some value to bring to the table. And I really like talking. That's like my thing. I like connecting with people. So like, let's go on podcasts, right? Well, fast forward 6 months, I hadn't pitched myself to a single podcast. Truth be told, I had insane imposter syndrome because I don't do social media. My website sucked at the time. I thought, like, who's going to want to feature me? So my team jumped in. My saving grace, my team, they helped me jump over my biggest mindset hurdle of having imposter syndrome. And they started getting me booked on podcasts. And I was right. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I started connecting with some really amazing people. But the thing that kind of shook everything up was I realized that it was the number one client generating activity that we were doing. It was sending leads to our business. And so we decided to kind of just try it out on our clients. I'd wanted to niche down. Running a virtual assistant agency is this wide, we offered so many services. It's just this big business. It's hard to fulfill on the back end. It's hard to hire. And I wanted to do something more specific. So we tried out guest podcast booking on our clients. It worked really well. And I'm like, okay, this is what we do. Like, I love being a podcast guest. We can get clients as a podcast guest. I didn't even know that podcast booking agencies were a thing when I decided to do this. I just knew that it was a method that was working. And so that's how my business was born, and it got where it is today.
That's interesting. And then, yeah, you didn't have a digital presence, so getting onto a podcast is really difficult. What's interesting is that I had somewhat of a digital presence, somewhat well known. Though my experience with it in that case was I got invited to podcasts. I would talk to people and they'd be like, "I need you on my podcast. You should come on." That's my experience with that. So podcasts were kind of just handed to me. I
That's
liked it.
fun.
And the podcasts that I did with people were very popular and successful. And I was like, well, why don't I just host a podcast? It'll be fun. So did it for funsies, and then found out, wow, this actually generates business. Even though I will never sell through it. It's a not-for-profit podcast, never will be. If anything, I lose money from it,
Yeah.
right? But that's the thing. It's a labor of love, and it will create the connections that you need in order to be successful. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah.
So what would you say about doing these podcasts when you start looking at the image of who you are and projecting that outward through not only voice but video? What does that start transforming into?
Well, I think that you've got to, this is something that you have to really ask yourself before you become a podcast guest. And this is, for me, is like the stark difference between people who go on podcasts and it's effective for them and people who go on podcasts and it's not effective for them. You have to be thinking about like, how do I use this platform to provide value? How do I use this platform to make connections? And I think that that's the root of the conversation we need to be having as podcast guests and even podcast hosts. I think that too many people are going into this endeavor thinking about how can I just attract like millions of people so that I become famous and more people know me, and they miss out on actually making an impact because they're not thinking about what value they're bringing to the table, if that makes sense. So one of the things that I make sure that I tell people when they're exploring podcast guesting is, yes, this is marketing. Yes, this is PR. Don't get me wrong. It is those things. But if those are your pure motivations, then you're going to miss out actually on like what we found to be like 75% of the profitability that happens from being a podcast guest. That profitability comes from seeing the person on the other end of the microphone. So as a guest, you're on the other end as the host, seeing you as somebody who I could have a networking relationship with. Like, who are you connected with that would be beneficial to me? Who am I connected with that could be beneficial to you? How could we be referral partners? How could we be collaborative partners? How could I continue to show up in your environment and serve your clients and your customers? That's where the true like value of being in the podcast world
It's
comes
true.
from.
Podcasts are a very intimate experience. The good ones are, at the very least. Where if it's a podcast that has a set of questions, like, oh yeah, 10 questions for entrepreneur, that stuff, nobody fucking listens to that.
I hate those.
No one likes them. Literally, no one likes them. It's a way to just flex stuff. And then people are trying to sell, or the ones where people try to sell on them. Nobody likes those either. You get the bottom of the barrel people who are trying to buy from you. It's not effective, and people don't appreciate it. It's not something that's easily consumed. The reason the intimate ones, where it's a conversation between you and the guest, like we're having right now, and it's meant to be intimate, and it's literally a conversation between me and you. The way that it's supposed to feel is that people are listening in to a private conversation between experts or around a subject. And that's what sells it. It's the realness. And that's why, I do an uncut, unfiltered version of a podcast, totally raw, because it's real, it's human, right? And I don't know if this is weird for people who listen to my podcast to hear me say this, but because it's kind of like an Inception type of a thing that's happening right now. But that's the idea, is that it is that intimate experience between you and the host, or the guest and the host, to get to know each other. And if other people are moved by it, they will reach out.
Yeah.
It's not about selling anything.
I think that's why I was successful at first, because I didn't go into being a podcast guest as like, I want to get on a podcast because I think it's going to generate more clients. For me, it was like, I just love talking about entrepreneurship. And I feel like people need to be having these conversations about, delegation, about how, we're getting duped by all these marketers that are telling us that we need to live these really complicated marketing lives. Like, my heart was actually very philanthropic when I started being a podcast guest. And the lead generation was just something that kind of accidentally happened. And when we reverse engineered it,
outcome, it's not the purpose. That's what people tend to forget.
Yeah. When we reverse engineered it, we saw some of our like very first podcast booking clients. They came in and they saw it as just marketing, and they didn't treat the relationships like relationships. And they started asking us like, well, I don't understand. Why is it not producing the same results for me as it is for you? And it's like, well, okay, we've got to dial it back here. You have the wrong
If they have that mindset going into it that they want to sell, or if it's for marketing, they're going to be a shit guest.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people that have had that mindset, and that's why I put a whole filtering process beforehand. I need to interview you first. There needs to be a discovery. If you're a guest, I would have rejected you. But I've had podcasts that I've recorded. It was a total waste of my time. I literally never aired them. Wouldn't air them. No.
Yeah.
So it's awful. It was a terrible podcast. Like, sorry. Then you have to go back to that person and explain to them saying, listen, it was not a good podcast. So to keep my brand intact, I'm not airing our episode. I'm sorry.
I think that's important for podcast guests to hear, because the objective of a podcast host is to provide as much value as they possibly can to their audience, right?
Exactly.
And if you want to be on a podcast, you have to align your goals with that podcast host's goals. So how can you, as a podcast guest, provide as much value as possible? Not talk yourself up. It's not all about sharing your accolades as a guest. It's about having a meaningful conversation where people can listen and go, oh, I feel like I learned something from that. Oh, I think I want to listen to Down the Rabbit Hole podcast, another episode. You know, you want to create this like virality for the podcast host. And so you've got to change the way you think about being a guest to be effective.
It's making it habitual. You add enough value and there's enough diversity and there's enough consistency where someone can add it to, and even releasing it same time, same day, every single week. Otherwise, it will never be successful. Is that they need to build it into their weekly habits or their daily habits. If you deviate from that, you'll lose a ton of listeners because, oh, you released the episode instead of 8 a.m., you released it at 4 p.m. Like 30-40% of your listenership just dropped, literally gone.
That reminds me of my favorite YouTube channel, this couple that's building this house like off grid. And I noticed when their episodes were not releasing on time, and it started to frustrate me. So yeah, there is this consumer expectation that you stay on schedule.
Yeah. You have to treat it like a consumer product. Yeah. Like, you know, they say, let's say a video game is going to release on November 17th at midnight. And then 2 months beforehand, oh, we pushed it back to December 24th. Everybody loses their shit. Some people won't even buy the game anymore.
Right.
If they pre-ordered it, great. If they didn't, they're just like, yeah, whatever. I'll just buy something else. It's kind of interesting how that works. It becomes like, it's fandom is what it is.
Yeah.
Fandom. And so with that said, since the audience becomes so into it, now, what do you do or what do you suggest to people to elevate the audience that's listening?
Yeah, the way that I think about this is in terms of conversations that I feel need to happen on a podcast interview. It's another one of the things that I kind of looked back and it's like, okay, why was this a client attraction thing for me? Like, I don't know, what was I saying that made people want to hire me? Like, I was just trying to talk to them about, you know, what I had learned. And we've come up with, there's actually 3 distinct conversations that we think are really important for you to be prepared to have as a podcast guest, so that those listening get value, but they also, they understand at the core of it, they need to understand like what you do and who you do it for, without being just straight up promotional, because that everybody wants to throw up when podcast guests are like,
nobody likes
this is what I do.
Just sit down.
and that includes like your freebie offers. You know, I've had people say like, you can't promote your freebie offers. I'm like, that's fine. Like, you just have to have the right conversation so that people understand what you do and who you do it for. So from a very practical standpoint, those 3 conversations that we tell all of our clients they've got to have. The first one is understand how to articulate like your transformational story, or what gives you the know, like, and trust factor. So 2 things, what makes you both relatable and inspirational. Like, how, when somebody's asking you to describe yourself or talk about your entrepreneurial journey, because most of the people we work with are entrepreneurs serving entrepreneur audience. Like,
it shouldn't be flaunty. It should feel familiar. Like they, oh, you know what? I get this person.
Yeah.
And like you said, people buy from the people they know, like, and trust.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
So if they feel like they can get to know you, like they trust you, and that they resonate with you, they relate to you, then they're likely to reach out to you to do business with you. It's that simple.
And they're going to continue listening. Yeah, they're gonna continue listening. And the caveat to that is you've got to know how to talk about it in a really short period of time, a medium amount of time, and a long period of time. So getting your story kind of straight and knowing what things to highlight when you have to highlight things, that's pretty important. The next thing is understanding what case studies really bring the most value to the table. So as you're talking, like, are there opportunities to talk about how you've created transformation in other people's lives? What I have found that this does is it helps the people listening put themselves in the shoes of the people that you work with, in a very natural way. Like,
Yeah, through experience. It's guidance through experience is what you're trying to
Exactly.
accomplish there, and that's really important because theoretically everything sounds great, but until you apply it to an actual thing or a case or a use case or an experience that has happened, it's difficult for people to relate to that unless you're someone like me, who is hyper analytical and literally creates theories for a living. So it's like, theory is great as long as you can mathematically prove it, it's real.
Yeah.
But people need to see it to believe it. They need to experience it to believe it. They need to be able to project themselves into an experience to believe it because people are visual thinkers.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's our job as a podcast guest to know what of those stories are the most impactful. And they have to bring value. So if you can tie in some value to that, like how the client got to what they or accomplished what they accomplished, like that's, cherry on top. The third thing is sharing methodology. And so being willing to just lay it all out on the table. Nothing irritates me more than like cliffhanger marketing, where it's like, I'm going to tell you 2 of the 3 steps, but if you want to know the last step, you've got to download my freebie offer. Or like, I'm going to tease you with what benefits you could have, but I'm not going to provide any
That's good for
value.
consumer marketing, but like in B2B, like you're a dick.
Yeah,
For lack of a
it's
better, that's
terrible.
a professional term, actually. You're a dick. That's what you are at that point. And cliffhanger marketing, I mean, it's just it's playing off of the fear of missing out
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a way that's not acceptable.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, and I've put a lot of thought into this. If you think about it, most of the things that most of us do in our businesses can be Googled or looked up on YouTube. Like, I think what you do is an exception. Like, I'm not going to be able to
Yeah, no,
figure out
we're
what
yet
you
to find
do.
an actual direct competitor. Like to this day, we've been looking for years, and we've crossed off everybody on the list who we thought because we spoke to all of them directly. We're
Right.
like, okay, nope, and I bet you they crossed us off their list too. Okay, nope, and then
But
it's kind of
you're
funny.
so unique. Like what you do is so unique. In most cases, you can like especially what I do. You can literally find like hundreds of blogs or videos about how to do what I do. And so I think that it's doing yourself a disservice to not just frankly talk about how to do what I do. Because when we talk about what we do and we explain our methodology, when we explain what makes us really an expert in what we do, it boosts our authority. It elevates us to this expert status. And I don't know about you, but I'm interested in working with people who don't want to do it themselves. They're not wanting to read all the how to
I
articles.
love that you say that. There are two different types of people in this world. A good friend of mine, Gavin Tice, he used to work for like a venture company, and now he works with another. So, what he told me is that there are two types of people, and I've heard this said in a million. There are a million two different types of people out there, right? But there are two types of people in this case. There are the people who have a lot of time and no money, and then there are the people who have a lot of money and no time.
We want the second.
We want the second, but that's the done for you people who have everything done for them.
Yeah.
The people who do it themselves are actually the ones with a lot of time and no money, which
Yeah.
is interesting because you'd think that people who DIY would have no time and they would have a lot of money to handle it. No, it's the exact opposite of what you think. Those are the two different types of people. So if you're looking to attract people who have budget, then you're going after the people who have no time and they have a whole lot of money in that case. Because
Yeah.
if you even teach someone how to do something, you make a how-to video, you do a podcast on it, you show them how to do it, the majority of people are going to come to you to do it for them.
Yep. Exactly.
Ease and
Exactly.
convenience always sells and
And
wins.
and you've got to make it convenient. Like one of the things that I noticed is that I didn't have to create these long like nurture series, like, this freebie offer that then convinces people that I still know what I'm talking about and then asking them to hire me. It's like if I can showcase how much I know as quickly as possible, then they feel comfortable just jumping over like, okay, Kristen knows how to do what she's saying that she knows how to do. I'm ready to just hire her. I'm not going to spend my time getting an opt-in offer. I'm not going to spend,
A
2
16-step
weeks.
sequence and
Yes.
within a cadence, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people are doing that method. And for me, I found that just laying it all out there right up front, I've been able to get enough clients to build a successful business that I don't have to do all of the back end nurturing. And I
Well,
have some
you
people that
take a
come back
human
years
approach.
later.
You take a
What's
human approach, and that's the problem with the market. We've all slipped into this mile wide hole of high volume outreach, volumetric approach, spray and pray bullshit numbers game, when that's not actually what's going on. What's going on is that they don't know who they should be talking to. Like my company, we solve the who. Who should you speak to? There's the highest probability of fitting as a client and resonating with your offering and you as a human being. Boom. Here are all the people. We found the needles in the haystack. Before that type of technology, it's spray and pray because no one knew how to do it any better. In this case, with what you were doing, you're having actual conversations which lead to referrals, and it's very intimate, being very human. That's the way to do it before AI got into the equation, but you should still be mixing both of those things together.
Yeah.
And that is ideal because you can get clients by talking to people, actually talking to people.
Wow, who would have thought? It's almost as if we don't think about how people used to build businesses before technology. So we ditch that. And it's like we have to think about how people built businesses before technology so that we can bring those principles into our technology use. To just do one or the other is like you're totally missing the mark.
You literally just perfectly defined what I've dedicated my career to. That's the older principles of relationship building built into technology, that way that the technology can help you actually build relationships and have a real human connection. That's pretty much it.
And when you just focus on like what a lot of marketers are having you focus on, like just building these big followings, you're focusing on what I call vanity metrics. It's these top level metrics that don't actually boil down into paying customers. When you're missing out on that connection piece, when you can't identify people, when you aren't really connecting, like you're ultimately the way that I see is you're ultimately just trying to be famous. And
free community, to be famous, right? And
I'm not interested.
Interest is not intent. And intent has been misdefined in the market. Intent data, it's not intent data. It's interest data or it's action data, right? It's behavioral data. That's really what it is. Marketers didn't know what to define it, so they called it intent data, and it fucking sold like wildfire. That's what it did. So intent cannot be measured or proven until the intended outcome has been successful. So if they download a white paper, they have the intent to buy. No, their intent, literally their intent was to download the white paper. Intent complete. There's nothing further. There is no actual causative or even closely correlative data or evidence that leads to any sort of purchase whatsoever. Nothing. There's no way to connect it. It is totally unrelated. They're just interested. Interest is not intent. And intent data is not intent to buy. It's the intent of whatever the outcome was. People need to start understanding this. So B2B was given the wrong idea from this. So they called it intent data because it was B2C. About 86% of consumer purchases are based on, I've used this statistic 1,000 times in podcast too. It's based on an impulse buy. Businesses don't impulse buy, and they need to speak to somebody, and they need to bring it up to their team, and it needs to have direct human connection. Relationships need to be built, multiple people involved. Now, without this impulse buy thing, intent data is not really useful. Their intent was to what? Download a white paper, then what? You have a whole fucking sales process after that.
Yeah.
So it's been mislabeled. They're trying to find ways to make it work. And I wish more people were aware of this. You need to be focused more on the psychographic or the psychometrics of who they are, because know, like, and trust, as you said. Now, when you're talking about vanity metrics, okay, that's one of them, right? Or maybe like 5. I don't even know. But what are the vanity metrics that you see that are tracked, with an eagle's eye, that you think are absolutely absurd?
Well, followers, for one. I mean, I feel like I have this disdain for how social media is used. I don't love social media. I don't use social media. I'm only on LinkedIn. I don't do any of the others. It just, honestly, they make me feel icky most of the time. And I feel like there's this huge, huge push that every single business owner, every single company has to have this like large social media presence. And not to say that social media marketing doesn't work, because I do feel like it does work, but there is such a focus on the vanity metric of social media. And it's all about, well, how many followers?
12 million impressions and 10 people converted. How is that a good rate? How much did you spend for that campaign? $1.4 million. What the fuck are you doing? Like,
exactly. Yeah. And how many people are getting sucked into these messages of like how to grow by like 10,000 followers in 30 days or something like that? Like, who cares? If you're a business owner, for me specifically, number one, my motivation has been freedom. Number two has been the finances that follow. Whether it's finances or freedom, either way, whatever the motivation is, chances are your motivation is not fame. Fame in and of itself is not a successful business, but these vanity metrics that we're being like shoved down our throat, if you really look at it, it's just fame. It's just to make you look good, but who cares if you look good if you don't have any finances to back it, if you're not actually running an actual company? And this is
People would
why
argue to the death, a lot of marketers out there, that awareness is important and then demand generation. But what people don't get is that demand generation is not making people aware of you. It's giving people a reason to need what you have. It's creating that square in the market. Now, awareness is important, but if you can convert awareness with demand generation to become demand, that's good. If your target's off and there is no demand for it, you're fucked. That whole saying of if we build it, they will come is the greatest lie ever told, because you could build whatever you want, whether people buy it or not. It's the market itself dictates what you sell.
yeah
Period.
yeah
So there's a lot of fallacies built around a lot of those vanity metrics out there. I mean, look at email opens. You know that there are I have my server opens it to check if there's a virus in it first. So it will always say that I opened your email no matter what. It will always tell you that. So I could have just deleted it and never looked at it. Some people open emails just to delete them. Some people
Right.
open emails to make the notification go away.
Right.
Period. They're not interested. So
I'm
there
one
is
of those.
no actual metric behind opens except for that it was a failed attempt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Opens are failure metric, not a success metric.
Yeah. And I don't feel like people are talking about this. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think that people don't understand what a vanity metric is. And honestly, a vanity metric could be in any marketing strategy. It just depends on how deep you're willing to take the marketing strategy. And so, for me, vanity metric means that you're just attracting. You're just attracting people. Well, to have a successful business, you have to attract people, but you also have to nurture them. You have to sell to them, turn them into clients and customers, and you have to retain them. You have to keep them around, continue to serve them. So it's
Well, I mean, what is marketing's job? People seem to forget this all the time, even marketers. Their
yeah,
job
right.
is to pass leads to sales that convert and drive
And if
conversion.
they don't, it's a failure.
No matter how popular, no matter how famous, no matter how many impressions, no matter how many likes, no matter how many clicks, if it doesn't convert, you are not doing your job.
Right. Right.
Period. I don't care about any of it. None of it. Like how many? Oh, we had 10,000 clicks on this ad. Congratulations. How many of them bought it? Oh, nobody bought it.
It
Okay, so
means
why am I
nothing.
paying you?
Yeah.
It's insane. It's literally insane. And these algorithms, like we were saying with social media advertising, the algorithms are built against the advertiser. It's a relevance algorithm. Trust me, I deal in algorithms. It's what I do. So they built a relevance algorithm, and when they have that AI that optimizes your advertising, they optimize it to be relevant, so it's in their favor to keep feeding the masses. Because to a social media platform, you are their product, the
Yeah.
user. That's why it's free. You're their product. They pull all your data, they learn about you, then they advertise to you. They keep it relevant. They don't care if you buy or not because they don't make commission. They want people to
Right.
keep dumping money into the slot machine, hoping that people buy through the ad. So as long as it's relevant content, it keeps the users happy. And every now and then they click. So there's optimization algorithms that they put into it. They optimize it just enough so you start getting that click through and that conversion that you want. But then as soon as it works well enough, they plateau it. They don't optimize it anymore. Or they optimize it further and they increase your cost per click astronomically because they know you're going to make money.
Yeah.
It works against you.
Yeah. This is where I believe entrepreneurship becomes really complicated, and complicated beyond what is necessary. There's this focus on metrics that aren't really making a difference in your business, but they sound really good, so you don't want to stop doing the thing. And so then you start adding another marketing strategy and another marketing strategy and another marketing
It's
strategy,
the
and you're
shoulda,
like,
coulda, wouldas. Oh yeah, no. If
exactly,
we get more web traffic, we should get more conversion. Oh,
exactly,
since we have this web, a lot more web traffic, they could be a customer.
yeah,
So we should try to keep remarketing to them.
yeah,
And then, oh, if we did this, we would have converted those people. No, no. If the traffic is going to your site and they're not converting, they're not a customer. Period.
yeah,
They didn't buy. Get over it.
Yeah.
And it's how do we build a machine in order to convert as much as possible is the question. And even if your web traffic goes down from 100,000 to 10,000, literally you lose 90% of your traffic. If you're landing 3 times the amount of customers, why do you give a shit?
Exactly. Exactly. It's not about vanity. Like we've got to stop thinking about success in these terms. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So what else do you believe is something that is a grave mistake that so many people make?
Oh gosh. Well, from I think this is something that I can just harp on a ton, and I think that you can relate here. People just forget that at the heart of business, there's got to be connection. Like that's got to be the root of it. So connection at all levels, I will say. So at first, connection with other people, like your peers. So that's why I call podcast guesting networking on steroids, because I feel like it's networking with peers. So like the podcast host and the podcast guest are peers, and that connection there is so important.
And
And
it's equal.
yeah, yeah, it is. But then at the next level, connecting with the people that you're serving too. I feel like that's something that just gets missed all across the board because we're just so focused on having our name be known, attracting new people that don't know us, that we don't dig deep. And digging deep is the most profitable thing that I've ever done. I'll tell you that. It is why I was able to grow a business without social media, without a website. It's because I connected with people, and people know other people. And yeah,
Word of
it's
mouth
been
to this day
fulfilling.
is still the most effective form of marketing or advertising. And like you say, uh, the customer becomes an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a
when that
bummer.
happens, you're going to fail. For those of you who don't know, about 40% on average of unearned revenue is contained in your existing client base due to the failure of cross selling and upselling.
That's
You
such
can
a
increase
good
your
stat.
revenue by 40% of your total revenue by effectively cross-selling and upselling your existing customers.
Oh,
They
that's
are
so good.
5 times less expensive to market to and 6 to 12 times less expensive to sell to, with a 400% greater success rate of doing so.
Can we just push pause and rewind and listen to it again?
Yeah, no, right? That's the way that
That's
it
good.
works.
That's so good. And in what we do, we have found that only 25% of the profit comes from just being a podcast guest and watching an episode drop, like the actual publication of the episode. The 75% that comes being a profitable podcast guest is connecting with the host and trying to figure out how you can leverage the relationship and how you can continue to serve one another and each other's communities down the road. So, like, people are just missing the mark by focusing on top level stuff and not digging in deep.
Yeah, it's
It's
incredible.
actually easier to dig in deep, don't you think? Like I would rather connect with somebody like face to face and have a conversation and then continue the relationship than go try to make a new relationship with somebody. Like why are we all about just like new relationship, new relationship, new relationship? Like why don't we just nurture the people that we've
You know
got?
what's sad? That's what dating's become too, because like Tinder and all that shit, that's what it's
Yeah.
like new one, new one, new one, next, 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 next. It's we're built around that. It's like it's totally self-destructed. It's collapsed on itself, the entire framework, because selling is just like dating. Now that dating's like that, selling's like that.
That's a really good insight. Thank goodness I'm not doing that. Oh, that just sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. So we're moving on to the next stage here. So the two most important questions. Now, if everybody were to forget the entire conversation that we just had, what is the one thing, and you can do multiple, but what is the one thing that you want people to walk away with and remember for the rest of their lives or their careers, whichever one actually matters to them, that you think that they should take action on immediately within their business?
Dig deep. Focus on connections. I feel like I'm like beating a dead horse here, but it just has to be said in every single, if we're talking about marketing, in every single marketing initiative that you have, if you're going to choose to do it, dig deep. Focus on those connections that are being made. Don't forget about the people that are already in your corner. If you are just starting out, then find people to be in your corner. Like people are at the root of what I believe makes us most successful. And so I feel like connection for the sake of deeply connecting can solve a lot of problems. in business, in personal life. I found it to be personally fulfilling when I do this in business. So it kind of ripples one over into the other. Yeah. Yeah. You can't skip over it. Can't be done.
Yeah, makes sense. Becoming friends with your prospects is also a good one too.
That's
Where
good.
if you get on like a texting relationship with them, if you're texting them back and forth, just like about day to day stuff, you're in it. You're in it with them because they now see you as a friend, not as a provider. That's one of the most powerful moves you can make if you can get there. But it's all about asking them permission if you can first.
People
You
want
don't
to know
just
that you
start out.
care.
Yeah. They want to know you give a shit about them and that you care about them. I know some people who don't buy from somebody where they want to make sure that they're going to follow up with them and add more value before they decide to purchase over the course of like a week or 2 weeks, where they literally are testing to see if you give a shit about them before they buy from you. If you fail that test, you're not selling a thing to them.
I love that test. That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
really good.
I mean, it is kind of inconvenient though, because if you give off all the right vibes, they just don't trust anybody. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And then second question. What's the best place for people to find you or to contact you?
Yeah, so it's very simple. We have a website, yesbossva.com, and I hang out on LinkedIn. It's the only social media platform that I hang out on. And the spelling of my name is unique. So if you type it into the search bar, I'm the only one that shows up. Very convenient for me.
That is true. I did that, and it is 100% true. She's the only one who pops up. So it's going to be unique like that, right?
I like it.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Awesome. So I want to thank you so much for being on today. Very much appreciated. Had a great time, Kristen.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation too.
Of course. Yeah. The pleasure's mine. And again, this is brought to you by White Rabbit Intel. Know more, win more, and close often is all we want you to do. And again, I am your host, Rob Turley. And if you share this, please do. Family, friends, colleagues, if you learned something and if it added value, try to pass it along because that's what I value, is helping more people. If you use hashtag DTRH podcast, very much appreciated. If you tag me in anything that you share, I'm more than happy to engage with it to help drive your engagement. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great afternoon. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Down the Rabbit Hole podcast for new episodes weekly on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, and YouTube. If you'd like to apply to be featured on the podcast or recommend a featured guest, please feel free to email us at theteam@whiterabbitintel.com.